One final series here to come for the Intel Extreme Masters PyeongChang day number 1 as we get down to the nitty-gritty of everything. To my left-hand side, I'm joined by Pig and Artosis to get things broken down on our next series. We just had our TVT, though, conclude. You guys were covering quite a bit of that. And overall, what we saw there, you know, Kellerzor able to kind of march on strong there in a lot of those aggressive moves and tendencies.
Yeah, and you know, he played fantastically. He's going to have a hard next round, so good luck to him.
Yeah.
But, you know, this next match as well, we have a very aggressive player in it.
Yes, we definitely do, Pig. When it comes to kind of what Zerg can bring to the table as well with their aggression, it can be zany, it can be wacky, you can do a lot of different little things that are quite tricky.
Oh yeah, and especially in Zerg vs Protoss. I mean, we are going to be seeing Bly in the next match. Bly is an incredible player. He's a guy who's been known as this guy who could just destroy so many online tournaments, especially.
Yeah.
And it's, back in Heart of the Swarm and Late Wings of Liberty had some massive finishes in a lot of LAN events as well. He's a guy who just brings out aggression, crazy strategies, and it's not so much I'm going to just flawlessly execute my build order. It's I'm going to get in your head. I'm going to take advantage of the mistakes in your play, the holes in your defense.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get an opportunity to cover him a little bit more in depth in a few moments' time here, of course. As you did see, just see the schedule and the games that have gone on so far. Of course, this is going to be Probe going up against Bly. So we're going to have our Oceania region representative going up against Bly, who is from the Ukraine, who came out of the Eastern European qualifier. And for the Eastern European region as a whole, someone like Bly is a guy that continuously rises to the very top of a very strong and formidable region, Artosis.
Yeah, you know, Probe is such an interesting player to me. I do want to talk about him a little bit where... like, Australia always has a strong scene, right? And it always has, like, one player that dominates it.
Yes.
In fact, he kind of took over your throne. You used to be the greatest Australian player, winning tournament after tournament over there, but now it's Probe. He's qualifying for everything.
He's been dominating it, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because Pig for a while did dominate, but then what happened?
Well, you know, a guy called Probe knocked me out of a WCS season one time.
Did he?
In a qualifier, and Todd never let me forget it. So, yeah, so he was a young gun, you know.
Yeah.
As a young boy, he used to hang out in my Twitch stream, asking questions about strategy, and now I ask him how to play Protoss, and he teaches me things. So the tables have turned. He's grown into an immensely powerful player, and it's really cool because it's been this very relaxed road for him. You know, Probe never came out and was like, I'm going to destroy the world, I'm going to dominate and be the best. He just really enjoyed the game, and he kind of improved at his own pace. He'd share strategy guides with the community, and normally these aren't the sort of guys you see rise to the top. So it was actually very surprising for me when we saw him come out and suddenly he's dominating these tournaments and he's winning every single qualifier from Australia. He's winning thousands and tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
And now we've got a beast on our hands, Protoss Powerhouse.
I really enjoy that idea of the long con by Probe. For the longest time, he's like, you're the best player in the region. I'll hang out in your chat, just kind of get to know you a little bit, you know, play it that way, but then all of a sudden he meets you in a tournament, and that's how it goes down. That's right, it's going to be Probe going up against Bly here. These two players, very formidable in the international scene by their own right. And we're going to start things out with Probe. We had a lovely little tale just a moment here by Pig. But Artosis, what do you think of a guy like Probe coming into this series or even this tournament?
Well, the hard thing is that he lives in Australia.
Yes.
As Pig, you well know, Australia is pretty far away from the rest of the world, so it's hard for him to really match up against Europeans that often. He kind of has to fly to an event to play against these guys, so we don't really know how well Probe will match up against them, but he has been rising very steadily over time.
Yeah, we've seen him really surprise, I think, with how quickly he went from, you know, everyone in their first international tournament tends to just get wiped. And then maybe the second and third one, they win a few maps, and eventually they start actually beating some players. But Probe very quickly went up to the stage where he was taking out the Petite Drogos. He was taking out the TLOs in these tournaments. He had a very close match with Neeb last year where he almost eliminated him at Valencia. So Probe has shown that he can compete on this international stage, but there definitely is a lack of experience against especially the European players, as Dan pointed out. Probe will actually be much more familiar with the Korean metagame and their play styles because of the regionalization and the fact that you can practice with the Koreans. There's no way to practice with Europeans from Australia.
Right. Actually, the one thing that I did want to mention, though, is that Probe was almost kind of forged in fire when it comes to that region because there were so many strong Zergs. And admittedly, like yourself, like, you know, all the other names that were down there. So does that give him a little bit of a heads up here coming into this, or is it just Bly's a bit more wacky and just kind of on his own level?
I think it's hard to prepare for such an aggressive player like Bly. You know, we talked about Kelliger being an aggressive player, and he was aggressive in the series.
Yeah.
But Bly is another level of aggression. This guy is just known for being so unbelievably aggressive. You can't really prepare for something like that. It's like, okay, probably he should play defensively, but what if Bly turns off the aggression for a moment and you're playing too passively at that point?
Yeah, and there is those moments, especially for someone like Bly, where he is a player that has been around in the StarCraft scene for a long, long time. I remember casting I think it was the WCS Ukrainian Nationals all the way back in 2012 that he did win with crazy proxy shenanigans, just crazy builds over and over and over. And when he's doing those kinds of builds, he's smiling. You can see him at the PC smiling, just loving life. So he's a scary opponent to go up against.
Yeah, I mean, that's the real challenge of facing Bly. He's the sort of player who makes you realize how many presumptions you have about what should happen in a game of StarCraft. You go in saying, well, at this time I do this because this is safe. And then Bly kills you. And you go, whoa, that's not safe. Because he's studied your play, and he's the kind of guy who will adjust everything in his style to try and find a chink in your armor. And that's what makes things very difficult. Now, one more note on Probe quickly. He's actually taking a year off school this year. He is going full-time. He's committing a lot more to the game. So I think he had a bit of a disappointing run-in against Bly, losing to him just very recently at Leipzig. I think this is his chance to kind of turn that around and really start to cement himself, as it's been a couple of months of hard practice for him. If he can stop Bly here, it's his first step into an ever-increasing road of results.
Can he extrapolate from those games, Artosis? Once you had those recent games against somebody, does that give you a little bit of good kind of base to get some knowledge from?
I would definitely say so. You know, you see where your weaknesses are. What were they doing that you had a big problem with? And normally as a pro gamer, you can look at that and say, okay, if I change these 2 things or these 3 things, I'm going to do much, much better against him. So I think that Bly cannot rest on his laurels against Probe here.
Right, right. I mean, if you look at how these two players have had their careers paved before them, obviously Bly has been around for a long, long time in the international scene. Probe not as much because Australia was so isolated. So has that hindered his progression throughout his career, or has he been able to kind of overcome something like that with the WCS circuit being as it is? What do you think?
You know, it's interesting. I think for Bly specifically, it's been a journey where even though he's had, I think, bigger results in past years, and he's often focused his success around the early stages of an expansion when things are new, because he plays so unique. He likes to figure things out on his own. But I think we're seeing what is maybe a little bit unexpected success for Bly deep into Legacy of the Void. And I feel like perhaps it's the faster paced nature of the game. Maybe it's the fact that there's more new units and strategies available, but he seems to have longevity in Legacy of the Void. And I actually feel like, unlike in Heart of the Swarm, where he fell off a few years in, I think he might just continue to get stronger as a player.
Do you agree with those sentiments?
I definitely do. I think that, you know, the aggressive players always are better when things are kind of unexplored, but Bly's been playing so long at this point that even if you've played very aggressively, you've kind of learned how to play in all sorts of different ways. So again, like, even though Probe may be lost and knows what went wrong previously, you have to be careful, because if you try to put him in a box, that's where he can really change it up and get you for that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I am going to find 2 other gentlemen out to get the opinions of as we continue things here for the Intel Extreme Masters PyeongChang. Let's head over to the commentary team that are going to be bringing you this next game, of course. It is going to be Mr. Nick Tasteless Plot and Johan Todd Merlot. Gentlemen, a lot taller than I. How are you doing? Are you looking forward to this game?
Very much so. Actually, going to this match, I was kind of thinking about who my favorite is and stuff. So I kind of looked up stats online.
Okay.
Bly has beaten Probe 4 times. They've played every year for the last 4 years. The last one of which was a week ago in Leipzig. And apparently, it's a bit of a nemesis of Probe. So really looking forward to this one. See if Probe can turn that in his favor this time around. But it's a best of 5. I would say they're about the same level. Like on paper, it's supposed to be a competitive match.
It's a very uncommon thing considering they're from extremely different regions, Nick.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think this really comes down to experience in this case, not necessarily like where their skill is online, like ladder rank or anything like that. Bly has so much experience. He's such a veteran.
Yeah.
Obviously, Probe is a phenomenal player, but by comparison, he's still a rookie. So in some sense, I'm rooting for Probe, but I will be pretty impressed if he actually pulls off a win here.
What does Probe have to look out for? Just a few quick thoughts before we get going.
From Bly, aggression and chaos. Bly would love to create chaos. He thrives in it. So that's what he needs to watch out for.
All right. How about you, Nick? Just kind of
I just want to see how the early game goes, maybe game 1, game 2. I want to see how Probe deals with Bly, assuming he, in fact, is aggressive. Sometimes the cheesiest thing you can do if you're a super aggressive player is to just macro up and not do anything at all. So we'll have to watch out for that, too.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This is going to be our final series of the day here for the Intel Extreme Masters PyeongChang, but it's sure to not disappoint as we have Probe going up against the ever so crazy Bly in our final series of the day.
All right, let's do this. We are going to be going into game number 1. This is Probe versus Bly. Again, as always, a best of 5 to decide who will survive to the next round of the Intel Extreme Masters PyeongChang.
Bit of a clash of styles. Probe known more for his, solid style throughout, taking more bases, playing it safe, seeing where he can do some damage and attack, whereas Bly a little bit more fast and furious, I would say, gets in your face, trying to surprise you a lot with constant aggression at times, but he knows how to play to that image, as you just mentioned. If somebody can expect aggression out of you, one of the best things you can do is kind of slow down, while still trying to sell that you're being aggressive so that they overreact. They prioritize the defense, in which case, if you're building up your economy, you're going to be in a great spot.
Yeah, just being able to survive potential aggression in StarCraft doesn't mean that that's going to allow you to win a game. If you overspend your resources getting ready for something that, in fact, was never going to occur to begin with, then you're behind in just a completely different way. So let's see if in game 1 or game 2, Bly takes the direction we're expecting from him to try to get in Probe's face and perhaps make him panic. When you're in a professional match, so much has led up to this moment, and especially with aggro players like Bly, that's really where things can fall apart, because a player like Probe might not have hit his stride yet. He might not feel completely comfortable until maybe 5 to 10 minutes in, and he's getting his game to where he wants it to be, to what he practiced for. So I think nerves are a big factor here for Probe. I think this is, out of all the matches we've casted here today, one where we really want to see psychologically where is Probe at, and is he ready to take on someone who's defeated him so many times before.
Absolutely, yeah. And StarCraft is a game of incomplete information. We all know that, but I would say Bly is definitely one of those guys that knows how to use this to his advantage the most. He has so many mind games in his play. He doesn't necessarily try to play straight up all the time. He will definitely be one of those guys that tries and trick you.
All right, we have now started game number 1. In the upper left, in the blue, from Australia, he is Probe. And in the bottom right, in the red, from Ukraine, our Zerg player, he is Bly.
Really looking forward to seeing what Bly opens up with. Nothing too crazy here to start with. It's just going to be a hatchery, usually extractor and a spawning pool is what follows. Probe with the early scout, I like that. You don't want to gamble against. Like, if there's one guy you don't want to gamble against and skip on that scout, is Bly, I would say. Like, you don't want to wake up with 8 lings in your middle line, not knowing what happens.
Well, look, I think this makes sense. Probe setting out a scout early on, as you were saying right before we had started the game, Todd. StarCraft is a game of incomplete information. That's what makes it different from so many strategy games that came before it. It's not just about understanding how to manage the economics of trying to mine resources and expand to different bases while denying your opponent from doing that very same thing. But it's also a game that's about lying. If you scout certain things, it may set you mentally off a certain algorithm in how you're responding. And a lot of good players
lying, about deceiving.
Yes, deceiving.
Opponents.
Yes, it's a game of deception. But if you can trick somebody or in some ways bluff your hand, as far as what you're showing them early on. You can trick somebody and set them up for a very fast loss, and that's really, I think, the big theme here for this best of 5 with Probe versus Bly. Is Bly is the deceptive, tricky player who also has such a plethora of experience under his belt when compared to Probe, who I would say is really one of our newer up-and-coming StarCraft 2 pros.
Definitely, yeah. Historically, we've had a lot of Zergs that have, like to play pretty aggressive and stuff, but as of late, I feel like most Zergs that are up there, in terms of being very good players that perform well in tournaments, they would much rather not do any trick, but rather build up their work accounts, get up to a lot of bases, and that's really when Zerg starts being the scariest. But Bly, he wants to play differently a lot of the time. You can definitely see him go up to multiple bases and even to some hive tech sometimes, but usually that will be off the back of already having tricked his opponent, into doing something worse or taking some damage, in which case he can get comfortably into that position. As we look into the point of view here of our Zerg player. Sneaking in a link.
And this is very important when you see this in first person, is the fact that you can't see the entire map, right?
Yeah.
So there's always those opportunities to try to hide and deceive. And of course try to just scout your opponent and get a read on what's going on. And really what makes Bly so strong is the fact that he can take how much you've seen, which usually, the general rule, of course, of StarCraft is that that's something that is always an advantage. But at the highest levels, a good player can use that against you and completely turn the tables once maybe that scout has been pushed out.
Did you see that? Like, we were looking at Bly's point of view, and then he shook his head a little bit. And I was like, why is he shaking his head? I look at the production tab, and he started 3 overlords. He was supply blocked for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Big mistake there, and I think he's already a little bit flustered by it. He has to start 3 overlords, then started a lot of drones at once. You don't want that to happen. Usually you want to be as smooth as possible with the production. Never get supply block, keep on droning up, and now that has slowed him down a little bit. He's actually skipped Spore because of it, even though he saw the Stargate, so he's going to rely on Quince to chase that Oracle away, but he might need some Spores down the line for sure.
So basically, the opening from Bly was not even done properly, which really is that's great for Probe. He of course might not fully be aware that that's happened just yet at this stage of the game, but that's also a kind of a strange thing to see coming from Bly, and that can definitely be a sign he might be already a little bit tilted now in this game. As generally speaking in Pro StarCraft 2, the early game should be so mapped out, especially if the game has any passivity at all.
I think that was like, what, his 3rd, 4th overload that he misses?
Usually his 4th or something like that.
Sometimes you can get supply block, but not that early, like it's a very unusual mistake here that definitely will slow him down.
Normally there have not been enough variables thrown into a game where we would view that as a normal reaction.
And the thing is, he showed emotion to it. Like, it's obviously not good news as well. Obviously it's not the end of the world, right? He's still trying to do what he can here on the work account, but he's already on less workers than Probe. Now he's going to lose some to these Oracles.
Now,
While Probe, it looks like he might be able to secure that 3rd base pretty easily here, unless these Lynx can do anything about it.
Now, as you can see, the Zerglings are coming up. There's only 2 Adepts for the time being. 3 to try to defend with 2 more warping in. The Oracles are not going to be able to get back to the base in time. We see them coming up. They're actually just barely going to get up here, it looks like, in time, as the last Adept is the only unit there to try to help hold on the ground and keep that Nexus alive. Look, so far I do feel like this has been a very bumpy start for Bly. Build order slightly off, his opening essentially slightly off, and then the initial attack was easily shut down there by Probe. And when we talked about Bly being a player who's so strong in the early game and is so tricky, I don't think he's going to have as many opportunities to do anything sly in this game number 1, having such a bumpy start so far.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. He might just try to steamroll that 3rd base with Hydralisks and Banelings, maybe, but he just got up on the walk account. Like, he was supposed to be ahead here at this stage, if he had been able to drone up as much as he would have liked to, but this is not ideal here for him, because if you look at the production tab, Probe is going to get super far ahead the better units he starts to get here, aka the Immortals, High Templars with Storm down the line. 2 Banelings are actually pretty scary here. If they manage to sneak into that middle line here, they will try, but 2 Adepts are on the way to intercept. Beautiful
placement here, and obviously you need 2 Banelings to destroy Probe, so damaging them is just not enough. So far so good here for Probe, and this is very important because since it is a best of 5 and we are in game 1, if Probe can play well, even if I think he loses this game, I think because this game's been off to such a good start, he should feel pretty encouraged by this going into game 2 and 3.
Yeah, Bly is going for Lurkers, though. The Lurkers currently in the Protoss versus Zerg matchup, they are truly the X factor. If you look at the production tab, like I said, Probe is getting all of the very strong units that a Protoss player can get. He's getting Immortals, High Templars with Storm. He's going to be going to Charge Lots as well. The one thing that is still very scary to this army on the ground will only be the Lurker, nothing else. Unless there is much more army, which there won't be this game, because Bly hasn't been able to build up his economy as much as he would have liked to. So now, he went for the 4th base. Bly is actually mining quite a bit of gas, which tells me he might not want to do a massive attack, but might want to do a siege with Lurkers, because those do require a lot of gas.
I agree. I think a slow sieging of that base is going to be more effective, especially if you consider that the base the Probe is taking, that's all the way in the upper right side of the map. That's actually a very long distance to travel. And there are parts or portions of that side of the map that can get a little bit boxy, and it doesn't allow for a very easy surround there if Bly were to try to come in here with more of an angular attack.
I think the dream right now for Bly is that he catches these two Oracles, kills them with some Hydralisks, and then the detection of Probe will be lackluster. It will just be observers, and then you can have Overseers to try and deal with that. But I mean, yeah, everything gets tagged. Like, this is going to keep on happening. If Bly cannot kill these Oracles, they're going to keep on tagging his Lurkers, which then makes a siege so hard to happen. Because if he goes across the map, he's off creep, he's committed to taking the fight. Probe can just take a great engagement, land storms, clean up, and be super far ahead.
You're completely correct. I mean, Lurkers are great if you can get them into the position you want to. Considering the fact that this 4th base, excuse me, is so far away, it will be hard for him to maneuver that over there without being punished. And, wow, even getting the trap set off there. So he's going to be able to clean up these Zerglings fairly easily. You know, a Protoss on 4 bases, all the gas is being mined. That's a serious thing for Zerg to deal with. Now, it seems like Bly is going to turn those lemons into lemonade here by abusing the fact that since these Zerglings are trapped, there's a higher chance that Probe is not going to be monitoring the army of Lurkers, which are coming up now.
He's trying to siege on the right-hand side. He's showing this army on the left-hand side here. And Probe has no idea that this is there. He hasn't tagged those units, so this siege might take out the base even before he can engage into his army there.
He might have just outmaneuvered him. Now, the angling here, though, especially with Sonic Storm, is going to be very good. And coming in here, and you could not have asked for better storms than that. Completely shutting down Bly's attack. And when you think that those Lurkers that he made, that was the primary economic investment into his army, was shut down so handedly, it wasn't exactly like there was any real trading going on. He smashed that attack up there, and this puts Bly in a very awkward position. His tempo is really going into the direction of the Protoss.
Yeah, Probe has just been so cost-effective. He's going to start on moving across the map. He wants to go for an attack on his own. He's going to attack those units, see what's placed where, and then decide if he can attack. Supposedly, I think he should be able to. Bly's doing a good job of buying time, though, across the map, forcing Probe to look there, maybe even to walk all the way back. This is a great move here by Bly. Whilst is going for a Spire, and already has Hive, so he might be trying to aim to go for these Broodlords, but Probe's already preparing for that. He's getting a Fleet Beacon, additional Stargates. This could go for very long, actually, despite all that has happened. And I thought that Probe might be able to, you know, close things out with a nice push. So far, Bly's doing a good job of staying in it.
Okay, now, just because that Lurker attack at the north was shut down a little while ago, it doesn't mean that Probe has an easy counter push. He has easier map control because of that, but Lurkers, you know, they're great for pushing. They're even better for defense. So on a map like this, where there's a lot of valleys, it's a little bit trickier for Protoss to have an angle that they can easily breach these locations.
Oh, and Probe is actually going to go for it. I think Bly was thinking about doing a Zergling attack on the right-hand side. As he pushes this back, he might be going for it. Yeah, this is going to keep on happening, by the way, on that 4th base, which is now really going to be threatened. He might have to recall. Oh, yeah, this could be really bad for Probe.
I think you're right. I'm not clear on how much... If we can actually get a shot in the upper right, I'm curious how much defense is actually there. Okay, there's nothing, really, because the cannon... That's obsolete.
He's gonna recall
comparison to this. So, in fact, I think he might not. I think he's just going to use Warpins here and end up losing a decent amount of probes. But he's going to keep his pressure on over here.
Oh wow! And now these Zealots are going to start on doing some damage across the map, giving Bly a taste of his own medicine. You want to attack my 4th base? Here it is.
Okay, I think Probe is actually going to be able to come in here and shut down the 5th base of Bly. That'll put them in 4 base versus 4 base, which is always bad for Zerg. Zerg need to be up in expansions. With this many Immortals in the army, it's going to be, I think, fairly easy for Probe to just keep pushing in. I think if this location can be breached, then Bly was going to have to tap out of this game. But with defense like this, it seems like Bly can hold on a little bit longer.
Yeah, the fact that there was no adrenal glands, I think, is the reason Probe didn't have to recall on the top right. At first, that looked scary. I thought he might already have it, but that was still in the production tab and not completed yet. So good defense by Probe not to overreact. I know I would have recalled everything, and then the Zerg would have bought enough time to go into Broodlords. That next is going to be sniped, but I mean, if you look at the supply and at the army, Probe might just be getting ready to attack here to try and close things out. Those Broodlords going to be the only chance here for Bly to try and stay alive in this game.
I think Probe is going to have to just avoid the Broodlord army. That air fleet is just way too strong for Probe to deal with directly. And sometimes the best way to do this is to avoid them the entire game and just attack where that Broodlord army is not.
And that would be in the main base with the Prism or something, I guess,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Or simply waiting for a moment like this where Bly's going to try to push out, and then Probe may try to run around that army and go from there. But you have to keep in mind, this army from Probe is also not very nimble either. These are very slow, chunky units.
Absolutely, yeah. What does counter Broodlords, you ask me? Well, Tempest do, and that's why Bly's moving across the map, and I think was thinking about a push before there are Tempests, but now he kind of ends up chickening out, because I think he realized that he was going to be counter-attack if he brought everything across the map. This is really the way, like, in StarCraft, to beat your opponents, you have to kill all of their buildings. A lot of the time, that means going through the army, but not all the time. Sometimes, if you think you can't take on the army just yet, you just counter-attack with some army of your own. You buy some time, you force something like a base trade, and you make the game a chaotic one. Yeah, that's why counter-attacks like this, like small counter-attacks when the opponent's marching across the map in an attack that you were worried about, is the way to go.
Exactly. You don't always have to make the game a war of who's got the bigger army. It can be a war of who can get a better position over the opposing player. And I think that's the game that Probe is doing pretty effectively here. Even if these attacks aren't doing that much damage, it's keeping the Zerg player honest. And frankly, at this phase of the game, if you were to look at the mini-map and the way that this game is going, there are no easy expansions for Zerg to take from here that can't be pushed. Zerg is, at this point in time, because so much of the map is taken, as we take a look in this wide view, the bases that Bly would have to acquire if the game goes on for a little bit longer, that's easy for Probe to shut down. And in fact, in some ways, Probe may want to wait and drag this game out into a longer one.
And the units that Probe has thrown away, by the way, are very expendable. It's just been Zealous and Adepts. Literally the two most expendable units of Protoss. What has he replaced them with? Tempest, one of the best units that he could have in this game, just because there's so many Broodlords. Now he's going to start on dealing with them.
I'm actually wondering if this was a unwise decision to try to push out at this point in time. Storms coming down and blanketing this location. They're actually, it appears almost they're going to be hitting each other head-to-head here. I think Probe is either going to regroup or reconsider this move, as I think that would be a tough area to effectively engage in. Bly knowing that. Again, I think that really for Probe, he has to just keep doing these small assaults like the one we're seeing right over here and wait for Bly to start to drain his income. Because if Probe has a head-to-head fight with Bly and loses, it's going to take a long time for Probe to rebuild an army of this complexity.
He's supposed to win that fight with High Templars if he can land the proper Storms and feedback. Storm will be on the Hydralisks, feedback on the Vipers, because without Abducts here, Bly will lose this fight very, very hard. Abduct is a huge threat, but yeah, there's only 2 Vipers, and they really don't have that much energy. They need to keep on recharging that consistently. His army keeps on getting tagged, and the feedback lands! And I think from there, Bly is going to have such a harder time holding on. He immediately restarts 2 Vipers, but I think Probe right now realizes that he did something very right here in the last few seconds, and he's going to keep on pressing forward here with this massive army of his.
So in a situation like this, the game can really go either way. It comes down to how the execution of the actual attack is handled, because if somebody mismanages this, they can end up losing almost all of their army, and the game will be flipped on its head.
And Probe is confident right now. He sees the entire army of Bly. He's like, well, you don't really have much to offer for me as long as I micro properly, as long as I don't overcome it. I'm going to be able to win this, and that's just what he's looking to try and do. Kind of pick off units apart from afar up until the point Bly loses patience, engages into him, in which case he would try and finish off the game.
This is a very technical takedown that we're seeing attempted here by Probe. And Bly is also relying on some counterattacks of his own. But you can see it's a little bit easier in a situation like this for Probe to deal with that. But if he can just breach this location, I think the game will in fact end. Of course, any mismanaging of that, and then Probe will be back to square one here, trying to remake his army.
Oh, some massive storms landing on top of this army. He's going to recall out of there. Didn't like his position anymore. I mean, he did so much damage anyway.
and he actually had to destroy one of his structures
Open the
because
gates.
open the floodgates. He couldn't get some of his army out unless he had destroyed that. So we saw Probe actually retract, pull out from that situation. This may open an opportunity up here for Bly to try to take a base of his own. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think, especially at this phase of the game, we're at about 17 minutes, 30 seconds. I'm liking the position that Probe is in, and I'm not sure what exactly Bly wants to do, because the longer this game goes, the harder it is for the rate at which he's expanding and where he wants to try to take bases. It's going to be very, very tough.
I don't think Bly can go across the maps, that's the thing. I don't think he can fight off creep. He needs to kind of turtle and wait for Probe to make a mistake. I almost feel like the win is almost basically out of his hands at this point. Either Probe pushes and makes some big mistakes and maybe can somehow lose. Otherwise, it should be a win for him. And I mean, when you look at the army here, with the amount of Tempest that he has, he's going to be able to deal so well with the Bull Lords of Bly. He's getting Void Race to try and counter these Corruptors, teach them a little respect here. Yeah. It's always good to do that.
Yeah, it's. I think that's one way to actually try to engage this instead of getting bullied in various areas of the map because of the Tempests out there. But this is the tech tree that Bly has ultimately arrived at, and it's a one that is not mobile. Now, that being said, Probe's army composition is not particularly mobile. And when we think about the way this map is shaped, it's almost as if there's 5 major lanes that you can move through the center. And neither player is going to be particularly comfortable having to engage that, but they know that there is a clock running out. Yeah. They're eventually going to deplete all the resource patches and have to do something. So the I got this just now, 3 untapped resource locations on the map. The center left, the center right, and then there's a space just south of here. If we can pan down to that, please. This base,
that one's being guarded.
This one's being guarded, but I also don't think there's going to be an easy way for Probe to really deny that. But
yeah.
We may end up in a situation where every potential expansion has been acquired on this map. And I mean, if that occurs, then we have to see who is more effective at spending their money.
Oh, he does the feedbacks
great
again.
Job.
And this is why we were talking about Bly being an aggressive player. He won't have as much experience in this position as most Zergs will. And that's why he's making those mistakes, you know? If the Zerg here was, you know, somebody like a Cyril or something, you might not see him send his Vipers alone at the front like this and getting them feedbacks. That's a big mistake. That's a game-losing mistake right there. And he's made it twice now.
And this position is actually very, very difficult. It took Probe a long time to eventually maneuver over here, but now that he has this high ground area. It's very difficult ground-wise for Bly to try to engage this. Air-wise, it's not easy either with just a sheer number of Tempests. And this base goes down, which means that Bly is now up against the ropes economically, only having the 4 occupied locations at the bottom. And it seems like now Probe is going to just go for it. He's actually going to try to dart through here saying, your army might not be fast enough to catch up here. And he's going to barrel through, taking out this last base. Bly may have to tap out. We see some storms coming down here now, doing some nice damage, and it's really forcing Bly into an awkward spot. Bly, it looks like he's going to try to pull the trigger himself and see if he can actually win in a big fight down here. But I agree completely, and that's what he does. Bly is in hot water.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't much he could do. Like, he kept on thinking, I have to engage right now. I can't let him keep killing my bases. Okay, I'm going to engage. And then just like that, Probe is out of there. Well, it just felt like he couldn't engage, but he knew that he had to. Eventually, he accepted that, but it was too late. That base was gone, and I mean, Probe even killed a bunch of units here just before.
It's kind of funny, Todd, because we watched, it was about 3.5 minutes of Probe eventually achieving this position that was so dominant he could kill the base. And the moment that happened, within the next 15 seconds, Probe just darted and went for, you know, he didn't even necessarily have to do that, by the way. He could have stayed back, but instead he said, you know what? You're probably already assuming that you're going to have to expand to the far right. Instead, he just starts down there, smashes that bottom left base, and now we see, here we go, it's been spotted.
Some more storms landing here. Bly knows that he has to push this back. That base on the right hand side might be denied here in a second. Probe has upgrades on the way, so he could just wait for those to finish. And we're at the point now where Probe has been so cost effective that he's actually building a bank. He hasn't lost that many units in comparison to Bly here in this game. Like a 6,000 resources lost difference here right now. Oh my god, a lot of units died this game.
This is, yes, there's been a lot of death and destruction in this game. We're seeing a StarCraft game that is really playing out like a game of chess here. Probe has very effectively moved around the map and controlled the board in such a way that it's been tough for Bly to ever have any real opportunity to use the pieces he got to get here.
Yeah.
And this is really an impressive game here from Probe, who we talked about a lot of these games today between these two being very short. We're having quite the opposite here in game one, and I'm curious to see if this is indicative of what we're going to see in the rest of the series. But this is being handled so beautifully here by Probe. Now, keep in mind, Bly is a tenacious player. He has got a lot of experience in situations just like this, but he has a long, hard road ahead of him if he's going to come out on top here.
The one chance of Bly, I guess, is that if he maxes out right now with 32 walkers, his maxed out army is going to be 168, which would be bigger than the 137 of Probe. But the problem is that he's broke. He doesn't really have much minerals. He has a lot of gas. He's getting 15 drones right now. So he knows he needed to rebuild his economy a little bit. I think going for Infestors here might be one of the way for Infested Terrans and Fungal on this army. The thing is, Probe uses recall so well that even if Bly did that, as long as Probe starts on, taking the fight, landing a lot of storms, doing a lot of damage, he could just recall. Recalling mid-fight could be tricky. There is also Neural Parasite that could come into play, but it feels like Bly so far has been very hesitant to use Infestors more. He hasn't upgraded them, and now we do see the Neural. As I mentioned it, man, I thought that was the one thing he needs to add to his army. I think that's the one way Bly can win. If he keeps on turtling like this and Probe overextends, which so far he hasn't done. On the contrary, he's gotten out of there every time he needed to.
Okay, it seems like, once again, Probe is going to come in here and try to assert his dominance. Moving in these positions is not easy. And I have to say, Bly is handling this much better, slowly chipping away at the exterior air units that are just a little bit too far out.
Parasitic Bomb here was great. The dream for Bly is to use a bunch of Parasitic Bomb and Fungal on top of it. That's the absolute Zerg dream, where the Protoss army actually kind of would melt, and he might force a recall very quickly. But like I said, recall takes time, right? Those units are Probes, they might start dying before. That would be risky. He's actually hitting Chaos right now. He's Probe.
That's right.
The Golden Armada is almost complete.
If this is like the final battle in the Lord of the Rings here, Todd. We're having everything thrown out. That's cool to see that we've gotten to a game that's gotten this complex. We're having the most sophisticated and difficult to get to units finally being used. You can't have units like this early on in a game, and this game is approaching a half hour coming up here. Now, Bly, keep in mind, he's been staying alive in this game with almost no resources. Can we get a shot of the bottom center? Something's happening in the bottom center.
Yeah, on the third base of Bly, there was something there, but I think he just died. Oh, yeah, actually, Broodlord's clean up. Probably some Zealots. I saw 7 Zealots being whopped in. He's actually whopping 7 more. So I think Probe just wants to keep on sending Zealots on the left-hand side, kind of, onto that base.
Yeah, well, there is a scenario here that may play out if Probe were to bungle this game, and it's that Bly has been hanging on using way less resources because Probe's been so dominant, but Probe has not had the killing blow here. And there is a possibility that Probe eventually mines out his side of the map.
And then the next step will be sacrificing a couple of walkers, so reducing his walker count, and building an army as big as Bly's.
Exactly. But if he doesn't manage to win the game then, that means there's been more resources available to Bly for longer, so then he could actually have a comeback. It would be a real uphill fight, but it is possible. It doesn't often happen in a StarCraft 2 game, but it could happen here now.
Looks like the third mothership of this game is going to be remade, Tasteless. Starting to be an expensive venture to invest into the wrong crypto here.
Mothership punch card here, and if we get the 5th mothership comes out, he gets it for free.
We did that for sure.
Yeah, we need that. It looks like, once again, Probe is going to try to come in here. Now, this is a very tight area, and there's a lot he has to try to whittle away at before he can actually, I think, fully get in and do the damage he needs to do. And 1 or 2 missteps here.
Wow.
Missed that shot there. 1 or 2 missteps from Probe, and he can end up overextending, and Bly is going to gobble up this army.
Probe was doing really, really well so far, but Abducts are going to start on landing. Fungals will as well.
I think the real story here was how many of those Psy Storms connected. Now, not all the units were dying there for Bly, simply taking damage, and I think actually Bly...
Fungal.
Yeah, the Fungals are actually very nicely done. Unfortunately, I think Bly still absorbed too much damage when it was said and done. He had to back up. So supplies currently It's at 195, so basically he's maxed out. He can't make more units, whereas Bly is at 136. And if you look at what's being made here, it's now 5 carriers, as well as that mothership, compared to the 2 corruptors and a Viper. And this really highlights how economically strangled Bly has been for most of this game.
Hey, he has no bank either to make anything.
Right,
Like,
he
he's
has nothing
broke on
saved
gas.
up. Yeah.
I guess he could go for Hydralisks, but do you want to go for Hydralisk
No.
against this army? Probably not, no.
I don't think so. And if you look at how many, by comparison, so Probe has 10 grand in the bank as far as minerals go. Bly with now 100.
Yeah, it's going to be a real struggle.
Bly
from
is
there.
essentially living paycheck to paycheck this game, whereas Probe is like a hedge fund manager or something. He's doing okay.
Yeah, he's definitely doing good.
So once again, Probe's going to try to come down, and I think this is smart, by the way, by Probe. He's being incredibly patient this game, and we see 14 gateways being made.
I mean, he has such a bank. Sometimes it can happen where you lose some of your army. You know what comes back right away? Warp gate units. You just warp them.
Make
right
like
into the
A
fight.
bunch of stalkers,
Exactly.
even with Blink, and just go into the main.
I don't even think he's going to need that. He's landing some massive storms on top of this army. Bly going to go for broke here. Lands a parasitic bomb and a fungal, but he's running out of army here.
And now, with this attack happening again, I have to say, even though I believe Probe is going to win this game, it is a real testament to the kind of player that Bly is, that he's actually managed to hang on with this. But as each other carrier comes out, you are trading so much more efficiently with the Zerg. We now see these Hydras coming in down here, but that's going to be it. GG! Probe takes game number 1 off of Bly.
And it felt like Bly was the one getting swarmed this game. That was almost weird. Staying on his side of the map for the most part, just sending a couple links across the map, trying to do some damage or buy time. Probe solid throughout. This is kind of what we expected in a way. I mean, Bly wasn't necessarily that aggressive. It was more the starting build order, and I mean, he showed emotion, like I said, when he missed those overlords, and I think that kind of got him started in a very poor way. He's still, kind of talking to himself a little bit, looking a little bit bothered.
I'll tell you, Todd, I think that's a very important game because it is the first game. That's an exhausting round to play in, especially if you're Bly, where historically you are always beating Probe, and you've been a more dominant player for longer. The fact that he had to have that uphill fight that he eventually ended up losing anyways can be frustrating. Bly's going to have to get his head back in the game because game number 2 is coming up right now. And at the same time, on the other side of the table is Probe, who's saying, whoa, I just beat Bly in a really long and dramatic game. That was about a 30-minute game of StarCraft that exhibited the fact that Probe has a deep understanding of late game. If you were any other player but Probe and a few others in the world, you would have overextended and Bly would have had the comeback. But he was patient, because I would say 2/3 of that game were simply Probe at the perimeter of the territory of the map that Bly controlled, just chiseling away at defense.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's very hard to have the mental fortitude to say, okay, it was just a bad game from me, a faux pas. I will move on from there and I'll play better in the next 3 or 4. But Bly will have to do no less than that here if he wants to be able to try and come back in this series.
We're now moving into game number 2 in this best of 5. This is our final best of 5 here in day 1 at the Intel Extreme Masters in PyeongChang. And let's do it. We've started it up in the upper left in the blue, winning game number 1 from Australia. He is Probe. And his opponent in the bottom right, in the red from Ukraine, he is Bly.
Opening very similarly to the previous game by the look of things. It's going to be a hatchery into an extractor and a pull. And all the same for Probe. Gateway down the ramp, quick scouts. It's very usual in a best of 5, to always do the exact same opener as far as the first few buildings go,
That's
but then
right.
to try and mix it up from a certain point. Whether it's when you reach tier 2, that lair tech for Zerg or something like that, you want to keep your opponent on high alert, try and trick him here and there, which last game we didn't even get to this point for Bly. That's the big thing, because he missed a couple overlords, then had to make a lot of drones, then started losing extra drones because of this to the oracles. that just wasn't ideal. So I'm pretty sure he's going to be looking at his supply very closely here and starting overlords on time this time around, Tasteless.
You know, for those of you that are just now joining us, the story really between these two is Bly is a veteran player. Probe, obviously, an incredibly good StarCraft player, or he wouldn't be here, but by comparison, he's still somewhat of a rookie. Now, whenever you have these players who are truly veterans, even if they're not up to date with everything in the current meta game, or they're just maybe not feeling mechanically as strong as they have been in years past, generally they can still take out new players simply with the mind games, with the way in StarCraft you can manipulate what your opponent sees and doesn't see.
Yeah.
Win that mind game, and that's something that can sometimes be so frustrating for some of these newer players who have spent so much time practicing to then just be outmaneuvered like that. But this game, we saw Probe handedly shut down Bly early on, and I don't know if Bly is supposed to double down and do something even more aggressive at the start of this game, or if he's supposed to do the converse and instead play a very conservative econ game and exhibit his strength going head-to-head in a more traditional, orthodox StarCraft game that's centered around economics.
I think that would be the best thing for him to do, is just to keep on doing his thing, play solid, try and read into what Bly is doing. And to your points, Probe only recently became a pro player. Before that, he was always attending school, he wasn't full-time, whereas Bly, as you said, he's been around forever, and for that whole time, he's been full-time and training a lot, and always been, you know, one of those players to watch out for in the European scene, and as of late, even in the world scene, because he's made it to a lot of these tournaments. Ling's actually, ooh, that was, okay, they almost
Good escape.
Yeah, I'm out of here.
That could have been bad. So, you know, we're looking at what is under production here for both sides, and nothing seems to be really, I guess, that crazy coming here from Bly. Yes, he's going to try to do a drop over here, but it doesn't seem like there's a bunch of Lings that are also going to try to attack somewhere else. So let's see how Probe handles this.
It's very hard to see this just because there is so much room, you know, where this could be dropped, so you can't have units everywhere. So Probe, I mean, usually you should know that this could come and have enough at depths, and I think he does have enough. He has 3 in total. You want to minimize the losses on the probes here. So far he's lost 6.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised he didn't run away with the probes. He instead tried to use them to help with the fight. So this attack early on has already done enough damage, and it might even do a little bit more.
And those Pinlings, they will outrun the Adepts as well. Bly spots, I mean, he already saw this target, right? Like there was Phoenixes attacking, which, by the way, is a bit unusual to go into Phoenixes like this straight away. Usually you see some Oracles being used. The fact that Bly has done this much damage and is keeping Probe back at home, that might encourage him to do something special here. I don't think I saw any particular tech start just yet, and he started a very quick lair. So I wonder what this is for here right now. He has only 1 gas as of right now. He starts a bunch of spores back at home to make sure he's safe against the Phoenixes. I wouldn't be surprised if he saw a Hydra then, but what version of Hydralisk is it? Is it a flood across the map? I don't think a Nidus would be the case because he doesn't have enough gas.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I mean, one of the scary things now for Probe is because that attack that he did early on, which was sort of what we were more expecting of Bly to do and also to succeed in, that opens up a lot of different roads that Bly can now steer this game towards, that essentially Probe has to be ready for every conceivable thing that Bly can throw at him. And really, this is a scary thing because Bly is so, he is so smart. He is so able to handle a variety of situations and usually outsmart his opponent. So Probe is coming down now. He's trying to take out the Queens here in the Zerg base, but so far not doing really much of anything.
A mass Hydralisk or a Lurker Siege here could be incredible, because actually these Phoenixes are doing way more than they should be, but I guess on this map the bases are kind of spread out, so as long as they are roaming around they can always catch stuff. If you look at the area here on this wall-off of Probe that is natural, the gateways, if you do a siege here on the right-hand side of this, the Protoss has to be on the other side. And this is the only exit/entrance into this base. Like down there is like, you know, there is a river around it. You can't go in the water in StarCraft. So that would be very, very scary actually if Bly was to do something like that. And right now he's getting Muscular Augment, one of the 2 upgrades that you need for Hydralisk to be very effective. If he just starts on massing Hydralisk and does an attack, it could be scary because there is a timing before there is enough Colossus, which I'm assuming is what Probe is going to go for, where this kind of attack could be very, very scary for him to go into.
Yeah, and if he correctly abuses this window of time in which he can make a very precise attack, it's not going to be so much like a tactical win as he is just going to bludgeon his opponent. There's going to be way too much, and I think Bly will steamroll him, to be honest.
Yeah, but this is doing a lot of damage. How much has these Phoenixes killed so far?
Seems like
in
quite a
units,
bit.
in actual units killed. Can we see like the units that have died? Oh my god. These guys are butchers, man.
Quite a bit, actually. Considering the damage that was done earlier on, Probe seems to be managing to even things out.
And he's forcing transfuses. This is a big deal. If Bly wants to do an attack, usually you'd bring your queens there. We see +2 missile attack starting. Still no additional tech. There it is. The Lurker then is going to start here for Bly. And he's already mining quite a bit of gas, so maybe a Lurker siege, but now it's already kind of late. We see Colossus in production, the Twilight Council and additional gates, and keep in mind, Phoenixes can pick up Lurkers if there were to be a fight.
I wonder how exactly this... Oh, hold on. Never mind. I don't have to wonder anymore because now we have this attack. So
I'm not wondering anymore.
I'll just say what I'm seeing happening. So we see the attack happening right now. The Hydralisks are going to try to come and attack in here. Now this Colossus is positioned behind these structures so that the Hydralisks can't run up to it and fight it directly. Bly, aware of that, decides to back off and try to destroy the structures.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about. What is Probe supposed to do? He can't move out from the wall. If he stays behind it, he loses buildings at the front. Bly could even do that to the gateway now, but he doesn't want to risk it. Getting jumped on top of and losing a lot because he knows about the threat of these Phoenixes as well.
Well, also, the longer those Hydralisks stay out there, eventually Probe will have enough and he can come out and actually wipe that out. It's very important that Bly doesn't suffer any losses here.
Look at this. He goes for the fourth base. He's like, you have enough there? You won't have enough in the main. Flies into the main base now with the Phoenixes. And there isn't enough there. Kills a bunch of drones. Sees the Spire. This is a big deal here, actually getting the information.
Yeah, almost
and the Lurker then as well.
Almost stumbling upon that little secret there from Bly. No.
Oh!
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have to say, I thought that more was going to be shot down there, but it seems like the way the Hydralisks ended up targeting that. But that was only one Phoenix that was killed, correct?
They're beaten and bruised, though. They can't come back anytime soon.
Yeah. But if I were a Probe, I'd take that over ever losing them for sure. But
Corruptors actually being made.
Wow. So this is more of a direct response to the air threat here from Probe.
Bly realized there is not only Phoenixes that are terrible against Corruptors, there is also Colossus tech. So if you go for Corruptors like this, you can jump on top of the Colossi, kill them, and then the unit that Probe has invested into the most is not there anymore to help him deal with the rest of the Zerg army, which in this case will be a lot of Hydras, Lurkers on the ground. And like I said, that attack at the front is still going to be the very scary one if he was to go for some sort of siege. Because if he busts that position, Probe is going to be in so much trouble. But Probe is doing pretty well army supply-wise, just because of those Phoenixes and all the damage that they did. 77 army against 90 right now. He's going into Storm. That's going to complete before the attack actually happens. He's going to charge +2. This attack has to happen soon here for Bly if he wants to be able to do something with it.
Now, seeing these Corruptors, he's going to get... Oh,
surprise!
Hold on. He needs to just get that one last Colossus over there, and I think he's taken out the necessary key units to then make Bly a big attack from him advantageous. So now the Corruptors, since they can only hit air, are just going to look for any opportunities to take down anything air-based, and it looks like they're pretty much going to just kind of orbit through.
I think they wanted to snipe a Nexus.
Yeah.
If there were not enough units around, but now they made sure there is no Colossus around, and now the real siege begins. And because he killed the Colossi, it means that less Immortals were made, which Immortals, like you need them to be able to deal with the Lurkers, and there it is. That Nexus is going to melt so fast, Tasteless.
Okay, we see these Stalkers coming up here, but it's not going to be enough in time, and the Nexus goes down. A great tactical attack there by Bly, seeing that Probe was not respecting the fact that those units were there, but meanwhile, a push coming out.
And I think he's going to do more of that. He's going to threaten at the front with the main army, send in the Corruptors again, and try and get another Nexus to force more units of Probe to stay elsewhere. The Lurkers are going to siege and burrow right on top of that fourth base. Probe has to defend that, but it's going to be so hard to engage into Lurkers.
As you can see, with the Lurkers now burrowing here, Sonic Storm's coming down to try to drive this out. I think, okay, so he just barely did not manage to take that out. This is an interesting situation where a lot of the structures...
I think he lost the Observer.
Did he?
Yeah, that's why he had to pull back. He couldn't see the Lurkers anymore.
At first I thought it was because of the setup of the structures there that he wasn't able to get his army in an angle that would be desirable, but I think you're right.
I think one of the cannons was allowing him to see that.
That's it. GG.
Wow.
Nicely done by Bly. And that's the exact kind of play that Probe was worried about Bly delivering here. Bly, a lot of that game was him thinking on his feet. Him seeing the setup of the army of Probe, and identifying, for instance, that maybe Probe is over-defending his front. flies over there with the Corruptors, takes out that third base. He sees then Probe in a state of panic. He tries to come out for the siege bust so that he won't be contained anymore. But Bly's already outmaneuvered him, running around and then taking out that last base. So a really impressive takedown there from Bly.
And I mean, StarCraft is a very momentum-based game. We already talked about this. We saw how in Game 1, Probe got all the momentum in the world because of his safe and solid opener, as opposed to Bly, who messed up with the production, got supply blocked for a little bit, and paid a high price for it from falling behind. That game, it was the opposite. His build was well executed. He dropped links inside of the base of Probe, and it's actually a very common build on this map, because on the third base, you can drop there and then walk into the natural and then main base with speed links. Yet somehow, it seemed to have caught Probe off guard. He started losing walkers, and from there, Bly always knows exactly what to do, and this game was no different.
That's right. In game number 1, Probe winning in a long, drawn-out, patient game. Bly having a little bit of a lead here in game number 2, but ultimately it was the brilliant mid to mid-late game tactics that brought this beautiful takedown there of Probe. So we're now going to go into game 3 in this best of 5, but it's tied up 1-1 right now. Very exciting stuff.
I think perhaps Probe went on autopilot a little bit, I like to call it, because that's when you kind of get a little bit lazy with your scouting. You don't know what the opponent's doing, and then you just go into the next composition, go into the next deck without knowing what the opponent's up to, and that's what cost him the game. Let's see if he can fix that here.
Let's see if he can. We now move into game number 3. Probe versus Bly, Australia versus Ukraine. Introducing our players in their locations in the bottom left. From Australia, he is Probe. And his opponent here in the upper right from Ukraine, he is Bly.
Definitely opening map 2 right. And then from there, still kind of playing tricky. Like doing Lurker, Siege plus Corruptors is not your typical build. It's definitely one of the builds that, if you're Bly, you'd love to use, because it's in itself very, very tricky. You jump on top of the Colossi and snipe them. But like I said, imagine if that game, Probe, instead of going for Storm, had gotten Blink Stalkers and Mass Stalkers. Then the Corruptors wouldn't have been as much of a problem.
Right.
And he would have actually killed them. Or even if he saw them coming. But the big win for Bly was to chase those Phoenixes away. Because then he took the information away from him. I mean, sure, there was a Spire, but who reads that it's going to be Corruptors? You actually need to see them to be ready.
It's a very unconventional way to play the game. And in some ways, Bly just being a little bit greener than, Probe being a little bit greener than Bly, I think it's a smart move there. Where I think in some ways Probe is playing more of a proper game of StarCraft. Bly is playing around the fact that he knows Probe tends to play a bit more like that and is actually punishing him for it. Now, what are we going to see here in game number 2? I'm curious if Bly will do anything crazy aggressive early on, because he's actually been pretty modest with some of his aggro moves at the start.
It would be hard. Like, Probe defensively, I would say, is definitely pretty good, and he also opens very safe. He goes for Stargate. Like, so far, in the first 2 maps, we've seen a Stargate opener, which makes you fairly safe against almost anything, provided you put some effort into the scouting and seeing what's coming your way. So we'll see here if he does anything different. Stargate has really, kind of came back as the main build. For some time, you were seeing a lot of Twilight Council into Robo and Dark Shrine openers with War Prisms across the map, but now it's really come back to Stargate first and foremost, and there it is. Probe yet again going for that one. It
does seem to me, just from the 2 games we've seen of Probe, the current way he's playing the game is very much a reactionary one. He wants to scout, he wants to get a read on what his opponent's doing, and he wants to get all the way to the point where all the tech is set up, where I don't feel like Bly, and this is not a fault of Bly, by the way, but he doesn't seem to be exhibiting as much of an interest in doing that. It's much more about...
He's trying to set the pace with whatever he wants to go into, basically.
He's going for much more of a tempo-based game here. So, we're looking first person here of Probe playing right now. And as you can see, I know we do have viewers watching this who might not be that familiar with StarCraft, but it's a very action-intensive game. You have to be juggling so many tasks at once here. And of course, you don't get to see everything that we see right now. You only see what your units see. So getting intel is very important, but also being deceptive, as we were talking about in one of our earlier games, is important as well, because you can trick your opponent. You can lie to them.
Yeah, trying deceiving the opponent is always an important part of StarCraft there. And both players, they're using the tools that they have to scout something across the map very, very well. Like, that's where we see Bly right now with the Overlords. He's checked the Stargates. He's looking at the front right now with one Ling, making sure that those gateways are not producing anything, and he saw that they weren't making anything for the time being. He's being active everywhere across the map while keeping up with his production on his side of the map. That's why sometimes it looks like it's so easy to forget to make the Overlords, which will allow you to keep on making more units, because otherwise your supply blocked, which is bad news.
And particularly in a game like this at the start, we're seeing, once again, just Probe try to get all of the proper units out and all the proper structures out so that he can progress. Probe does seem to be somebody who wants to get to the point where he's deflected all possible attacks here by Bly, and then closes out, which is interesting. I expected possibly, well, hold on, we actually might have a little bit more aggression coming up here. We have a Warp Prism coming out right away.
Yeah, and he's getting charged and a Templar gets. So usually you see a couple Archons and High Templars into Archons being warped in. But actually,
wow, look at this.
This could be a massive commitment. So, this is a massive gateway explosion we're seeing.
This is showing what a developed player that Probe is he's actually going for a much more different approach.
We've kept on talking about hiding something from the opponent. He killed the Overlord of Bly.
Right.
How is Bly supposed to see those gateways and know that he has to make units?
Well,
he's not going to see that.
He just won't know. And this is going to come out at such a rate.
But look at what Bly is doing. He's massing units. He wants to go for his own attack. They might just clash somehow.
Yeah.
Well, really not knowing what the opponent was doing.
It seems like he might have ended up duping his opponent a little bit, but it seems like the direction Bly was going to go anyways, unless Bly's instincts are so strong that he's simply getting ready to try to flat out shut this down.
Yeah, I think he just wanted to go for an attack, and he might be getting lucky here. Unless he saw Probe do this build before, this is highly unusual. Like, the standard is to be taking more bases. Protoss right now would be taking a third base, and Bly even sees everything here thanks to some links on that watchtower. He's only making units. That's all he has to do. If he makes units, if he defends that attack, Bly is going to be in a fantastic spot here in this game. And right now he's awaiting for the attack that's headed his way.
Okay, Probe now commencing this attack. Bly realizing it's quite convenient that he actually managed to get an army this early. And from here, note the Warp Prism is set up, and he could try to run in here and gun this down. Oh, wow, and a huge win here for Bly. He completely takes out this army. And from here, I don't even think that there's any way that Probe can get a third base.
Yeah, he left his Oracle behind as well. That died instantly. Bly, knowing that he's defended, is going to build up his economy a little bit more, sees that there's no third base from Probe. He knows he's in a fantastic position from there.
That's it. He taps out. GG. Nicely done by Bly. That was an interesting course that game ended up taking. I
wonder, like, did he? It's almost as if he knew. Maybe he saw Probe do this in the past. You know, we call this meta game in StarCraft. It's the informations that you've collected beforehand.
And then if that is the case, then the technique he just pulled is called the blind counter, which is even if you don't have a proper read on it, you pretty much you still expected them to do it. And of course, that's another factor in this game that makes it so tricky. And you can see Probe visibly a bit shaken by that because, you know, honestly, he probably thought everything was going his way, but the moment that he moved out, Bly smashed him. So we will be going into game number 4 shortly here, and we will see then what exactly Probe is going to do going into that. And I think we're actually going to be going into a commercial in just a second here. So guys, don't go away. We'll be going into game number 4 in just a little bit here at the Intel Extreme Masters in PyeongChang.